Hello and welcome to Hexed Encountered. My name is Joe. Today I'm going to be looking at the brand new game from MicroProse called Second Front. Second Front is a tactical Hex Encounter style game with some neat graphics to it that kind of almost make it feel almost like a miniatures game in a way. But it definitely has that kind of old school tactical vibe with phases of each turn. It's an I go, you go, and the phases of the turns will be very familiar to people who've played tabletop tactical games. You have your movement phase, movement or fire phase. You can move, stop, and fire. You can also, but if you move, if you fire from a standstill, then you can't move after that. There's also like an advanced phase where you will be able to move up one hex, and there's a lot of neat little things in this game that I really enjoy, and I think this game is actually pretty fantastic in general. So let's take a look at some of what the game offers, because beyond just being a really solid tactical war game, you also have the ability to edit and create your own maps, your own scenarios, your own campaigns. They have this garage here. We can take a look at that really quick. And in the garage, you can see all the weapons and things that are in the game. So basically, like your vehicles and so on. So you pick your faction. There are 3 factions in the game, as you can see down here in the lower left: the Germans, the Russians, and the Americans. And then you can look at various things. So you have your tanks, you have your tank destroyers, your basic self-propelled gun type. Then you have, personnel carriers and armored cars and trucks and guns. So there's a whole lot of, besides, and then of course you also have infantry, and those guys come with the whole slew of weapon types that would go, support weapons basically. So as I mentioned, this is very similar in a lot of ways to a lot of, tabletop games where you have units, and the units can have a support weapon, whether that's a machine gun or a Panzerfaust or Panzerschreck or bazooka, whatever it may be, anti-tank rifle. All of those things are in the game. So, like here we have the Germans, right? So you can see there's a whole slew of vehicles here from Panzer IIs all the way out to the Tigers and so on. The big boys here. Even your flak panzers and so on, and you can see you select it and it kind of gives you a view of what it looks like. The graphics in this game are really cool in my opinion, because it's a 3D game, so you get kind of that miniature feel, because you will see tanks, you will see guns, you will see the soldiers, and they're animated and they'll run. And they'll, when there are explosions, you'll see the explosions, and when the tanks are moving, the exhaust is coming out the back, and you can actually tell, because you can give an armored unit an order to move, and then at the end of the move, you can decide to stop or to be kind of in a continuous move mode. And if you leave it in the continuous move mode, you'll actually see the smoke coming out of it, even though the unit's not currently moving. So as I said, I really think this game is really, really well done. I really enjoy it. So, I've had it for about 12 days maybe, and I've played almost 35 hours. So that tells you something, that I've played 35 hours and I have not, until now, done any content on it, because I wanted to really run it through its paces, and I enjoy it as well. Run it through its paces and see what makes this thing so good, all the things that it has to offer. So as I mentioned, you have this, and you can switch nationalities, and maybe you want to see, like the T-34 or something. So let's find it. Here we go. So, you have the Mark 40 and the 41 here. So you get kind of a thing, and obviously it's a lot smaller than our big old Tiger over here. So you can move up. Here's the most famous variant, I believe, and this one has the big gun, the 85. And then down here we have, the KV tanks, which is starting to get into the heavy tanks, and of course you do have the Stalin tank in here as well, with the gigantic, for the time, 122 millimeter gun. That is an enormous gun for the Second World War. But so you can see, and you can look at and up top here, it'll tell you kind of like its armor piercing power, and you can see like the IS-2 here is a really powerful tank, and then it's kind of like its penetration values for various areas, and you can see, just as you would expect, when you hit the turret or you hit the back, you have or the side, you have a lot more damage available to you than when you go to the front. The front armor is always the hard, typically front armor is the strongest armor on an armored fighting vehicle, because that's, they're facing the enemy in theory, right? So just like in anything else, you want to get around them, flank them, get behind them, etc., to destroy them. So real world tactics definitely do apply in this game as well. And you can see with its 122 millimeter gun, this thing is death on pretty much any facing you want to put it at. So that's what you would expect with a gun that big. I mean, this is crazy how powerful that is. But you see, this is the garage, and as I said, you can look at various things. So if you wanted to kind of look in here and find, these are Soviet guns, obviously, but if we switched over to the Germans, you can go through and see all there. Here's the famous Flak 88. And again, it tells you, kind of what its damage is. And if you wanted to, say, well, how does it handle maybe a Jeep or something? You can throw a Jeep in here. And, you can you compare like to like, essentially. So, but you do get, information, and all of this stuff is really explained in the help and in the manual. The game does have a manual. When you purchase it on Steam, it's available as kind of a PDF, I guess, or yeah, it's a PDF. So you can kind of go through and read all this stuff. But the game is also pretty easy to pick up. And let me exit the garage here, and we'll go and take a look at the tutorial scenarios. So this is the campaigns. I've unlocked all the campaigns. I've been playing, as I mentioned, 35 hours-ish. And so these are various campaigns. But over here you have infantry tutorials, and there's a whole series of them, 12. And then you also have some armor tutorials dealing with how you handle your vehicles. All of these are good, really, really kind of granular. You go through them step by step. And it starts really, really basic. How do you move? How do you aim? How do you fire? All that stuff. Very, very well laid out. You have a whole slew of them, as you can see. You have 12 for the infantry and another 7 for the armor. Then if you use these tabs up here, so we have the Americans, of course. These are scenarios that the Americans are in. And at start, you'll only have the top 2 available. And then as you play and win them, it unlocks more. And then each one will have a difficulty on it. So you can see A Town Too Far, which was the very first one I played personally, is a 2-star difficulty. Let's just click it. It's a 2-star difficulty. If you click the Forces tab, it gives you the description, which is also over here. But here's the description, and then it shows you what you start with. So you start with 2 elite infantry squads, basically. You have Lieutenant Thomas. You have 3 bazookas, a medium machine gun, and then 9 elite squads. These come in as reinforcements. When they have a turn number next to them, they come in as reinforcements. So these guys will be deployed on map at start, and then these guys show up in turn 1, and they show up basically on map edge, and you can bring them in. And then we get 2 more leaders on turn 2 with a bazooka and 9 elite rifle squads. And then on the German side, you have a Panzer IV that shows up on turn 3, and then these are their at start forces, and then they also get a turn 2 and turn 4 reinforcement. So you can look ahead of time, see what the composition of the forces are, and then play the scenario. This one, Recon by Force, I also played, and you get a description of where it is, and typically also, I think, it shows you here the date, and then after you complete it, before you play it, you'll just see the top portion here. So there's stuff about attacking Aachen and General Smith, doing a recon of the city prior to the Americans attacking it, and then at the end you get basically a recap of what happened historically, and then compared to how you did against that. This one actually is cut off. I just noticed that. So there are some little nitpicky kind of minor things that you'll come across that might seem a little strange or off or whatever, but it's really rare. Actually, no, it didn't get cut off. It just it went over here. I just noticed that. So sometimes the presentation, like maybe in this case, it would be better if you had a little, scroll bar to kind of go down, because I just noticed that it says up here and it kind of looks like it's with this. It's really, really, like I was thinking about this before I started this video. What would I say are my dislikes about this game? And I really couldn't come up with a whole lot. So to me, that's a good sign. I'm not really a tough grader. When I play games, typically I get some enjoyment out of it. Like, a game has to be really bad for me to be like, this is crap and I never want to see this again. Get it off my table, get it off my PC. I don't want to see this anymore. Not going to play this again. You have to be really terrible to reach that point for me. That's not to say I wouldn't have critiques of games. Just this one is pretty strong, and I think they did a good job of waiting until it was actually basically done. Because as you know, if you play PC games, a lot of games get rushed out and they come out and they're buggy, and things are bad, or they're unbalanced or whatever it is, and it's just terrible, and they get torn to shreds by reviewers and the people playing them and so on. I don't think that's going to be the case with this game. This game's pretty well done. And if you wanted to nitpick, you could say, well, there's only Germans, Americans, and Russians. What about the British? What about the French? What about the Italians? What about the Japanese? Et cetera, like that. And to me, that just means expansions. So you're going to start with these, and you're going to have expansions down the road. But to get back to this, so you can look at the various scenarios. As you win the first 2, it unlocks the next 4, I believe. Then you unlock 4, and it unlocks the next 4. And then if you complete, I think 8, you get the last 2. And you can kind of, if you go back to the picture one, you can hover over it, and it'll tell you win 8 scenarios to unlock fire and maneuver. And it's the same thing for fogged up beyond all recognition. So a lot of these cover, various things, obviously, and you can see the difficulty. So The Town Too Far, 2 stars. Recon by Force is 1 star. It's the easiest one. Abrupt Halt, 2 stars. But then you get these Normandy D-Day invasion ones, like this one, WN62, 4-star difficulty. That's a toughie. WN70, also a toughie, a 4-star. And the color kind of clues you in on that. Black, meaning like really difficult, right? So obviously I played a 1-star, 2 stars to unlock all this stuff. And what you'll discover is that you'll need to kind of plan things out ahead of time. When you see the forces at start, it has hidden units, so you're gonna, you need to kind of be a little cautious in advancing, but at the same time, you want to advance to contact, and sometimes that means your guys are going to get chewed up a little bit because you don't see that, that gun or that, rifle squad or maybe mortars or something. You just don't see them until they're dropping rounds on you, and then you're in trouble. But there is a lot of that, and it talks about that during the tutorials as well. As the Germans, you have your choice. You have 12 scenarios against the Soviets, and then you also have 12 scenarios against the Americans. I actually have not yet played the Germans against the Americans. That's the one thing I have not done yet, but I did play them against the Russians. 4 scenarios there to unlock the Stalingrad campaign, actually, is why I did that. And there is a Stalingrad scenario. This is a Stalingrad scenario, and there is a Stalingrad campaign. And then underneath, you'll see who created it. So Joe Bader is the guy who actually created the program, the game itself. He's the designer and the developer. It's a one man show. He didn't do the graphics, so he did have a graphic artist that worked along with him. And the graphics work in this game, as I've already mentioned, is very good in my opinion. So, but he did all the programming, and he's been working on this game. I watched if you look on YouTube for MicroProse's channel, there's a series of videos that they did with Mr. Bader on this game, and he goes through and talks about the long development process. Like, this game goes back 20 years that he's been working on this, and it shows like the care and devotion to this project really shines through, because, as I said, this is really well done, and you can tell that he's played war games because it captures all that stuff that you like. If you like tactical war games, you will like this game, because it all fits and it works, and it's familiar but with a presentation that is new and fresh. So I think that's my bottom line with the game itself. So as I mentioned here, this game, so let's just take a look at this, okay? So these are our reinforcements. We'll get, some armored cars here on turn 1. Turn 3, we'll get some Stug 3s, some Panzer 3s on turn 5, then a couple 4s on turn 6, and a half track. So this is our reinforcements. This up here indicates your basically like your morale, kind of, I guess. Yeah, your morale and your ammunition. So in terms of morale, it's the more you have. Like if you have 4, the color would be green. Then if you have 2, it goes to red. So obviously later in the war, you'll see the German morale be lower, because at that point there was a lot of replacements. They had been grinding for 4 years or so. When you're talking about 44, they've been fighting since 39. There was a lot of wear and tear, obviously, plus not to mention the Eastern Front was just a meat grinder for both sides, obviously. But the Soviets were getting stronger and the Germans were getting weaker, and as the game title, Second Front, they're fighting on multiple fronts, not only the Second Front in France, but also the Italian front, and they obviously fought in Africa and everything as well. So you can see why they would be kind of worn down. But the Russians at the same time, Stalingrad was obviously a tipping point in the war. The Germans it was like their high tide, basically, and that's the flipping point where things after that, basically, aside from, they had their occasional offensives and so on and so forth, but in general, they were fighting, they were fighting on the defensive for the balance of the war after that, by and large. Russian side, so they don't have any reinforcements, but they are pretty strong. They have some elite forces here. I believe, and I haven't looked in the manual to confirm this, but the black border here is like a guards unit. So it's like elite plus almost. They have maybe better weaponry than the regular elite, but they're still really good. And the Germans have that as well, which might be SS, or it just indicates they have better weapons. But they have a little bit more punch than the regular elite. Although they're still very, very hard to crack. Harder to crack than a regular or green. Obviously, green troops, you hit them, they're more likely to break. There is you can pin a unit, which is essentially suppressing it. You can then also break a unit, and when they break, they'll rout and run. And then if you leave some units without firing, because the way the turns are, as I mentioned, you have phases, and if you fire all your weapons early in the turn, then your reaction fire is limited or non-existent when the enemy moves. But if you break a unit and you leave other units with some fire capability, when that unit breaks and runs, you might kill them because they're running across open ground trying to get to, better cover or just get away from the enemy, and you shoot them down. So as you play, you'll pick up on these kind of nuances. And the things, like I said, if you play, I don't know, lock and load tactical, old school tactical, squad leader, advanced squad leader, any last 100 yards, any kind of tabletop tactical game, the stuff that works in those games will work in this game too. The basic tactics of, trying to pin your opponent, flank your opponent, You want to suppress them, and then you can more easily advance. Because if you break a unit, they won't be able to fire, and then you can literally run another unit right up to them, run a unit past them. So you'll learn to suppress units, and then you can also do the assault. There's a melee phase, so you can basically pin them, or you can kind of crawl to them. There's different move modes as well. And you know what? I'm just going to kind of show. So we'll jump into this. I have not played this scenario, so this will be a little bit interesting. So when you select the scenario, it's going to load up. Last stand at the grain elevator. You get the description. Obviously, this is Stalingrad. And this is, the battle around the grain elevator. So we hit continue. You get your little intro screen here. It's probably loading in the background. Gives you the location and the date. Then it fades out. Very theatrical presentation. It's a lot of fun. So here we go. We have reinforcements arriving. So you'll see this, and then at the bottom, I'm guessing, it's over here. You'll have where they're coming from. And you have your compass rose here that tells you which direction is north. So we're coming in from the west, apparently. Now, the German forces are this kind of bluish gray color, and the Soviets are this tannish kind of brown color. And if you hover over them, you see all the hexes that unit can see, basically. Another way you can do it is click the binoculars and hover. So you can see this is a machine gun. If we zoom in, light machine guns, right? We have a medium here and a medium here and a couple light machine guns. And so these two guys right here have a pretty deadly field of fire. Now there is some cover because you do have terrain effects. Again, this is all very, very familiar if you played tactical games. And the reason I said it's almost like miniatures in a way is because you get, you see your hexes obviously, but if you zoom in, you could get right down in the dirt here and kind of drive right through these buildings and stuff. And if we were to go over to the factory itself, you can see it gets a little wonky sometimes. But if you zoom out just enough, you get right in and you can see your actual soldiers. So that's kind of cool in my opinion. I mean, like I said, the graphics are cool. There's a little, I don't want to say cartoony because it sounds negative, but it's really not, and it's not. They're not photorealistic, obviously, but you get the idea. And I said as I said earlier, I really enjoy the presentation of this game and the fact that you can do stuff like this and zoom out, and you can see your shell holes and your burnt out trucks and all kinds of wrecked houses, all kinds of cool stuff. And the nice thing is when you go into like creating your own scenarios and creating your own campaigns, you can build this stuff. And there's 140 or something different buildings. And you can stitch things together and make giant factories like this. Multiple stories. This has 1, 2, 3 stories in it. So, I mean, it's really cool to me that you can do this kind of stuff. And then, of course, you can also zoom in and see your men, too. They've got their Stahlheims on, and, we got an officer in here, so you get a leader. It's really cool, in my opinion. But then, okay, so what do, right? It's our turn. Here's our phases. So we have the move and fire phase. Pretty straightforward. Again, very familiar if anybody's played a tactical game before. Then from there, you'll go to the fire phase for the Soviets. So they'll get their fire phase. Then there's the escape phase where broken units will run, basically. Okay, and then we go to our advance phase, which again, so basically, like if you move a unit up next to an enemy unit, you can use the advance phase to initiate close combat. Basically, you go into the hex with them, and it's just like most other games where you fight it out melee style inside that hex, and the winner typically sometimes it doesn't get resolved in one turn. Sometimes it does carry over. You can also kind of put multiple units in there, so you can kind of hit from two sides. And there's a lot of everything. There's modifiers for terrain and cover, firepower. This game is really detailed when you get down into the weeds and really look into what it's doing. Now, you don't see dice rolls or anything like that, but it does have a very kind of tabletop-y feel in the mechanical sense. there's it's step by step. You go through the phases. You'll see the odds for whatever action you're taking. And then, obviously there's the close combat phase that I just mentioned, where you'll go through that. And then after that, you have the recovery phase, which is typically officers rallying broken infantry, but can also include things like tank crews trying to repair their track or their gun, because your guns will break. So it's easy and tempting sometimes to fire at somebody. Like you have your tank and it's got like a 1% chance of hitting. It might be like, well, whatever, I'm going to take a shot and hit and fire anyway. Sometimes that's not a great idea because it's a 1% chance of hitting, and so you basically have almost no chance of hitting. But there's also possible negative repercussions because, one, you might not be able to do reaction fire if you do that. 2, you might break your gun. And 3, you might run out of ammunition. So all of these things can happen, and they're all obviously percentile chances. And it'll show you the percentile chances. And it's all on a percentage base, 0 to 100% basis. So it's all that is familiar from, like rolling dice. So you roll a die, you roll a 10-sided die, you get, anything under a 5 is a hit. Then you have a 50% chance, basically, right? So that's how it kind of translates. Now this is a sniper, so we have a sniper unit here. He's right here. So if you click on it, you get information down at the bottom. It tells you what floor he's on. He's on the 2nd floor, and then it's his range, and that's his strength, I think. And then he's got some his actions and so on. And again, this is all pretty well explained. There's a help. If you click this, you can see it'll tell you all the units. So you can go to infantry and it'll explain what all this stuff is: movement points, range, quality, morale. So that's what it is. It's morale. The weapon type, firepower, and so on. Here's a broken unit. Here's a pinned unit. Here's a leader. Leaders are important because leaders are the only ones who can rally your forces. And again, this is kind of I don't want to say a trope, but it is kind of something that's common to a lot of tactical games, is you have a unit, typically a leader unit, whose function is basically to rally his men, to, get them back into the fight, whatever. They also can apply modifiers to make you more effective, make your unit more effective, and that is also the case here. So you do have a leader bonus. 2 stars is a better bonus. Here's the morale, movement points, and his name. So they all have names. And it's kind of cool. And then you'll spawn heroes too, which again kind of reminds me of things like Lock and Load, right? You spawn a hero occasionally. They do heroic actions. They get this little kind of Ace of Spades symbol. So it's all, like I said, it's all kind of familiar. Taking pieces and parts that have been in tactical wargaming for a long time and kind of making this new exciting presentation of it. And it all works really, really, really well. So you have all these things about what the modifiers are, or just kind of basically icons that show you what the unit is, what their situation is. And there's a lot, and it's a lot to learn. But it's all pretty straightforward as well. And you're always able to just hit this and bring this up. And it shows you the different phases, and here's your phases, and it goes through everything. So one of the best things about a PC war game when it's done well is that everything is available to you information-wise, and it allows you to play the game and enjoy the game without having a lot of setup time and a lot of teardown time. Now, don't get me wrong, I enjoy playing tabletop war games a whole lot. That's why I have a YouTube channel, because the majority of the games I do on my YouTube channel are tabletop games. But it's also nice to see someone make a PC game that really catches the aesthetic of that tabletop experience, and I think this one really does it. I'm also a programmer, so there are times when I just don't want to be looking at a computer screen because I do it all day long. So, it's nice to get a break and play with, little cardboard counters and hopefully a mounted map. I love mounted maps. But, so this game really captures the what I really enjoy about tactical games. So as I mentioned, the help is extremely useful. You get, here's your what all the keys do. You can it's your typical WASD movement, and then you have the map pivots. You turn 90 degrees at a time. You can tab through your different building levels. You can look at the line of sight tool, which is basically your binoculars. So all that stuff is in here. This here will tell you your victory conditions. So you have to capture the victory location. That's a common, the way victory locations in this game work is, if we zoom back out, you can see here, it's a little hard to see it, but there, it's right at the top. Let me move back a little bit. This 100, you can also see it as like a real map if you come up. Whoops. Sorry. Hit the wrong key. So you can zoom. See, this is a relatively small map, to be honest. But this is like you're looking down at a tabletop kind of from this view. I mean, it's a little small. Like I said, this is a smaller map. But this is, pretty similar to what you would see if you were playing a tabletop war game. Then, of course, you zoom in a little bit and it gets its 3D aspect. But this is a 100 victory point, which basically means you have 10 turns, because you lose 10 victory points a turn. You have 10 turns to capture that building. If you don't capture that building in 10 turns, you will lose. And the other part of it is, if we go back to this, you have to have twice the enemy infantry force as also a requirement. So you can't just kind of go willy-nilly and get your force decimated and end up not having enough men. It's a balance of forces kind of thing. So there's essentially two elements to the victory. And it'll also tell you that it will attempt to recapture the locations until your force is at least 1.5 times as strong. So that's kind of an indicator for that as well. So once you select, so we have our sniper selected. Now, if he can see an enemy unit to shoot at, they get highlighted in red. He's far away. He's probably more than 12 hexes away. I'm not going to count, but he's probably more than 12 hexes away, and he can't see these guys. They're inside. They have a hero. There's a hero symbol right there. They have two heroes, actually. And a lot of things are done by right-clicking. So let's take this veteran squad here. They're in a building. It's a one-story building. They're on the ground floor. Obviously, they're equipped with a medium machine gun. We see that down here. So, and then you can kind of draw this out, and it'll show you what happens if you move. So basically, you see here the white is walk, the red is run. Now, if you go to 1 hex, you get crawl as well. Now, any of these are going to result in being exposed to enemy fire, because these guys are up high with a killer field of fire, and none of these houses really, because they don't have any roofs on them, are they're pretty easy to shoot into, I guess, especially since these guys are equipped with machine guns, and this one's a medium machine gun, so it's got decent punch. So let's just see what happens if I decide I want to kind of walk up into here. So basically, there are multiple levels of like bad idea. And you see the green. I can't really mouse over it because it'll go away. But you see the green kind of crosshair circle. That means you're going to get fired upon, potentially. Now, the AI can decide not to fire on you. Typically, they will, but there are times when they don't. And I'll talk about the AI here in a moment. And then the one next to it is kind of like doubly bad. That means you're probably going to get chewed up. So just to show what happens, you right click and then you right click again on what you choose to do. So you can run or walk. So let's run just to show. So here we're out in the open. Boom, we're getting hit. We got it killed. We killed our unit. Dead. So the unit's gone. That's why that's a bad idea. Now, that's one of the reasons why this is going to be a tough scenario to really do, because you end up with a situation where you're going to have to figure out a way to get across this killing ground, and that's going to be hard to do. I mean, you have numbers, but they are going to get worn down. Now, if you look to see who fired on you, you can see this is yellow. So this is the unit that fired on us. Okay. And they'll go from yellow to red. Red means they're expended and they cannot do another action. So in theory, if you want to send some sacrificial lambs out and get all these guys to fire off their rounds, then you can move people up. It's the kind of the human wave thing from the Soviet side. That was one of their tactics. Throw enough men at the enemy, some of them will eventually get through. I mean, that is a, potentially valid, strategy you can employ. So let's try this guy and we'll do crawl and you can see the difference, okay? So this is also a wall which provides a little bit of cover, a little bit, especially since they're up high and we are not. But we're going to crawl forward. We'll crawl forward and they didn't fire at us. Oh, they did fire at us, but you see there was no effect. They kind of, they're prone, they kind of shrugged it off. No harm, no foul. Again, we could come over here and see who fired. They may have gotten a freebie because you have a chance when you again. It comes back to thinking in terms of die rolls. You have a chance that you could get a second shot. So, like especially with an automatic weapon, with a tank gun, you can fire your gun and then maybe get a free shot, a second shot. Like you rolled so well, you get a second shot. Same thing with machine guns. You fire your machine gun, you get to fire it again. And I've had runs with 5 or 6 times in a row where you get to keep shooting. Mortars are the same way. You can drop round after round. And the cool thing with mortars and machine guns as well, and tank guns too, now that I think about it, is the more you fire without moving, your chance of hitting goes up. So mortars start off pretty low accuracy, but they'll go up as you continue to drop rounds because you're kind of, I guess, correcting your aim and getting, a little bit, getting more accurate, progressively more accurate with your fire. The other thing with mortars, if they're in the woods, just as in real life, you drop a mortar round or an high explosive round into trees, you get a lot of wooden shrapnel. It's more effective. So if you get an infantry unit hiding in some trees, you drop mortar rounds on them. You get a little bit better effect from that. That's why I'm saying there's a lot of nuance in this game in terms of like the effects of doing things. So this is kind of what this looks like, and I'm going to drop out because I want to show you some other things. But if we just click quick game, we go back out here. You can look at there's Russian scenarios as well. You have your campaigns. So here we have various campaigns. Here's the Stalingrad campaign. And again, if you click on it and then go to the description, it gives you the full explanation of what it is, the forces. It tells you the user that created it. His name's Red Menace. Steam Workshop already has, I think, 45 or so scenarios that people have uploaded for this. There's also some campaigns that have been uploaded for this. That's one of the great things is the community, I know, because this is what always happens. When you give people the ability to use the workshop and it's built into the game and you have, powerful editors like this game does, you get a lot of people who will churn out some good content for free that you can then add to your game and continue to play if you play through everything that's in here. And there's a good amount of things in here. We have 5 campaigns and we have 36 individual scenarios. 48. Because there's 12 German versus the Russians and 12 German versus Americans. So 48 scenarios plus 5 campaigns equals a lot of content. So you get a lot of bang for your buck with this game as well. And obviously then the other part of it is, so you can go to the Steam Workshop, this is common for Steam games. There's a workshop button. You can go and it'll pull up Steam and show you the workshop. You can create your own scenarios, as I mentioned. So there's a map editor. Map editor is pretty neat. Let's just load. I don't have anything because I haven't really messed around with this that much. But here's a map. This is a Town Too Far map, and then you can do things in here. Put trees, whatever's currently selected. So we have terrain, different terrain types. You want to make like a trench area, you can do that. Just like pop it in there. It's a hole. Roads and bridges. Look at all the different bridge types here. Railroads, obviously. buildings. As I mentioned, there are like 140 buildings in here. Just a whole lot of different things, big factory type building, or, maybe a government building or something. So if you wanted to create the Battle of Berlin or Stalingrad, obviously, or, any of the other kind of really big urban fights during the war, you can do that. Walls and hedges, decorations, facades. Look at all this stuff. Banks, hotels, theaters. There's a Soviet flag. One of the things I was playing one of the Soviet, I think German versus Soviet campaigns, and I think it was Pskov. We were attacking Pskov. I was playing as the Germans against the Soviets, and there were posters on the walls of some of the buildings, and I thought that was really like a neat little touch, which gives it, like I said, that kind of like miniatures aesthetic, which I think is really cool. Because you still have the heart of a really true nitty-gritty, grognard-friendly tactical war game here. And then you have this nice miniatures type aesthetic bolted on it with the, and they move. It's just real. I really, really think this game is well done. I know I keep saying that, but it's true. I mean, yeah, these were the posters I was talking about. Like, you've seen some of these posters, I'm sure. If we let's just put this on this building here. I'm not good at this. There, it's kind of on there, but it's going to look stupid probably. But, you can zoom in, and it's kind of in a weird spot. Whoops, I went the wrong way. But here, so you put that there, and then you can kind of zoom in and see it. And so you get the idea, right? And then you right click and it goes away. So there's all kinds of posters here. Not just Soviets, but others as well. Here's something for France. Just various things. They're kind of small and hard to see. It would be nice if you could see them a little bigger, but you get the idea. There's all kind, and there's statuary and signs and all kinds of like cool little things here. So here's some Kilroy was here stuff, some graffiti. So obviously there's a whole lot, bridges and roads, as I mentioned, terrain, elevation, you can raise and lower, and all of that stuff affects line of sight. So some of the scenarios, as I've played them through, the German field guns are a problem in some of these scenarios, and it's not just the Germans, whether you're playing against the Americans or the Russians or whoever, they all have guns, and all of these guns present a problem, especially to armor. So you have to kind of figure out a way to get at the gun and attack it. So you look at their line of sight using the line of sight tool, and you can see their blind spots, and you try to approach through the blind spots. And then you also have obviously other positions that the enemy is holding, where they basically, they have interlocking fields of fire, right? So on the defense, you can set up your forces so that you get those interlocking fields of fire, and you get a unit that kind of goes through there. Maybe they don't know you're there. They basically are in a world of hurt. So let me see if I can find, I think it was American. So yeah, so let's look at this one. I already played this, but I can show you what I'm talking about here somewhat. So this is obviously Normandy. This is post D-Day. We're in July. This is kind of the breakout phase. So here, this is a fairly decent sized map. I'd say maybe medium sized. Okay, so we have two victory locations we need to take. This guy here, which is kind of basically a road, and then we have this building up here. Now you have American reinforcements enter from down here, German reinforcements enter from here. Our map orientation doesn't have it. Oh, there it is. So north is this way to the left. So we're driving, I guess, that would be east. So we're driving east. Which makes sense, I guess. But you can see there's a gun here and there's a gun here, right? So if we put our binoculars on, Now you can see this guy, he commands the entire road. So if I were to say, hey, I've got tanks down here, I got my Shermans down here, I'm going to drive them right up this road. No, bad idea. This guy right here is going to chew you up. Then we have this guy as well, and so his field of fire extends this way. So what I did when I played this one is, let me turn this off. Where is it? They're over here. So I have these two half tracks. So I take, and you can see they got a pretty long range, right? So again, you want to avoid his line of sight, but he's got a lot of blind spots. So if you stay off the high ground down here and stay out of this area to the right where all the highlighted green, anything that's lit up is what he can see. So this is where terrain comes in, right? You've got these giant trees that block line of sight. You've got obviously the elevated terrain that blocks line of sight. So basically you want to approach up this area right here. So if we just turn this off and I take my half track, now I know I can get to, like, say here, and then you can see, like, if I right click, so we lock it in, you can close your hatch with a vehicle as well. You can go move, which means when you stop, you're still in motion, essentially. So that's a way to cover a lot of terrain on the second turn as well. So basically you're like, I'm not where I'm getting to. I'm not at my final destination. I want to keep my momentum going, so I keep going. There's a penalty on fire when you're in motion, as you would expect. And then you have your go and stop. Now, if you were to pick something shorter, like say we only went here, then you also have your unload. So you can move, stop, and unload your infantry, because this is an infantry, it's a personnel carrier. So we do have a squad of regular infantry there, and we can see that down here, that we're carrying these guys. And we also have an anti-aircraft machine gun on board. And then down here, it tells you that your engine is running and your hatch is currently closed or open. Maybe that's, open, close. So you can, basically what I did was I actually drove up to here, I think, because I wasn't sure what else they might have, and it turns out they have an infantry, at least if it's set up the same way every time. There's an infantry squad set up in here. So if I were to drive up here and stop, as we get closer, obviously our line of sight is changing. And we'll see if we see anything. And we don't. So they may... Oh, it's this guy right here, actually. They're right here. So they are here, and that's why I came over here, because there's an infantry squad here in addition to our gun. So basically what my thought was, and this is what I did when I played it, is I took my two half tracks, I put them here and here, I think. And then on the next turn, I brought one around, and this guy bugged out and went into the trees. Better cover, I guess. So what I did was I took my one half track, I came around, I went here, and then I drove up onto the ridge and I unloaded. And then I drove my other one around the back and went up here and unloaded. And these guys fired, but because we had better elevation, it didn't really make any difference. They didn't do any damage. So now I had two unmounted infantry squads here that I used to do a close assault on this gun. Now in the Germans' fire phase, because you do a move and fire phase, then the enemy does a fire phase. You can see that right here. So you go move and fire, then they fire, and so this gun went and it destroyed both my half tracks, the one here and the one here. But the infantry was fine. It didn't do anything to the infantry. They apparently found cover or whatever. So their vehicle was destroyed, but they had dismounted, so they were not killed. Then on the melee phase here at the end, because here in the advanced phase, I said I'm going to assault this guy. So I think I can actually show you this anyway. So let's go to load. Actually, no, not that one. Quick game. And I think it's on the main menu. Yeah. So you scroll. This is all the saves that I've played. Actually, it didn't do it. It must have, when I started a new one, it it deleted it. I had a whole. So these are all the scenarios I played. So you can go back, as long as you don't start a new one, you can go back and pick them up and show, how you did. I played through all the boot camp stuff, and then I played Recon by Force and A Town Too Far, Stop the Invaders. All of this is the order of stuff I played. And I played some other stuff that I think got wiped out. This was the first turn of the Stalingrad campaign, I think. Let's load this up. Yep, this is the Stalingrad campaign. So this is massive. You have a lot of reinforcements coming in on the German side as they're attacking Stalingrad, and then these are the defenders. This map is enormous. If I load this up so you can see it, so again, you get the whole description. It's loading once it gets done, because this is a fairly involved one. So we're in the factory district of Stalingrad, October 14th, 1942, right? So this is going to be a fairly large map. It tells you new reinforcements have arrived. So again, you go to your kind of overhead view. I like the overhead view. We have some guys up here. We have some guys down here and down here around the map edge. And then in terms of objectives, we have a 110 up here, so you got 11 turns to get that guy, and 11 turns to get this guy, and 14 turns to get this guy. And then, of course, this is all chock full of Russian defenders, and you have to go in there and weed them out or bypass them, depending. But they also react. So let's talk about the AI. The AI in this game is pretty good. To me, no AI is perfect. No AI is ever going to be the equal of a actual person playing against you. You're not going to be able to do it. But it does a really good job of kind of managing its forces and doing things that are logical and make sense. Sometimes it does things that are a little weird. But like I said, no AI is perfect. And if you don't plan carefully and execute your plan, or you get bad die rolls or whatever, which happens, you're gonna find it tough going. This game is tough. It's not easy to win these scenarios. Some of them I've had to play 3 or 4 times before I actually got past it, and those are like you saw, like 2-star scenarios. So from a challenging standpoint, this game is challenging. I'm probably not going to show too much gameplay in this video because it's a long one, and I know you probably want to see gameplay. There are other videos. Obviously, a lot of content creators were given a license, a free Steam key for this game to get the word out, and they show gameplay. A lot of them have shown gameplay. So I don't want to cover what other people have covered. I may do a gameplay video only because I enjoy this so much, and just do a whole scenario, just play it out. But it can take hours. So the point of this was to kind of go through all the pieces of the game and kind of just show them and talk about what they are and how this all works and fits together and everything. So I'm going to actually wrap this up because it's getting long, and I don't know how many people will actually watch this all the way to this point. But if you did, I appreciate that, and I hope you gleaned something from this. But my takeaway, the thing I want you guys to take away from this is, if you enjoy tactical war games, you will enjoy this game. This game hits all the right notes in terms of the gameplay itself, right? The gameplay is always important. The maps and the graphics they're all nice, and in this case that is true. They're nice graphics. They really add a lot to the game, but at the heart of it is, does the game work as a tactical game? If you're a grognard and you play war games, and maybe you're a hardcore ASL guy or something, you'll find something to enjoy in this game. Now, it's not going to be as, probably not as complicated as some of the ASL stuff, but there's depth in this engine. There's a lot of depth to it. It's involved, and you can get down in the weeds and figure out how all the weapon systems interact, and what gives you your best chance of doing a certain thing or whatever. If you're someone who likes to design scenarios, this thing is the toolkit in this game is fantastic. You can draw up all kinds of fun and interesting scenarios. Expansion wise, I see, I hope this game is successful because, let's add Africa. Let's add, the Italian forces. Let's add the British, To me, the British are the biggest missing piece in this. And then obviously you have the French, and you can add, the kind of the so-called minor combatants, Poland, Hungary, Romania, etc., etc. The Yugoslavians, the Greeks, all of these, like, I don't want to belittle their contribution to the war or whatever, but the other combatants in the war, and that's just in Europe. And then you can also do, the Pacific. The Pacific is wide open as well, and you can have the Japanese, obviously, U.S. Marine Corps, etc. There's a lot of room for growth, is my point here. So definitely excited about this game. Really, really like this game. I caught on to this pretty quickly, and that's why I played a lot of it, and why I waited to do a video, because I wanted to make sure that I really kind of dug in and played the various factions and did things so that I would have a feel for them. All the factions are different. The Americans have really good firepower, as you would expect. The Soviets, they're probably, the things that they do well, they come through in the game. Obviously their tanks, the T-34 is a really good tank. The Germans, all of them feel right. They all have their own. I mean, there's a lot of sameness in some ways, but you can differentiate, and not just because they look different. Not just because the Tiger looks different than a Sherman. That's not it. The strengths and weaknesses of the various vehicles and the various nationalities and their armies and their equipment, all this stuff is really rated at a really good depth, so that you can really differentiate between, the Germans and their Mausers against the Americans and their rifles, and the Soviets with their submachine guns and things. So there's a lot of variance in here, and it's really, really neat. So I am going to wrap it up. As I mentioned, thank you for watching. I definitely do hope that you got something out of the video. And as I said, I will give this the highest recommendation that I can if you like, war games on the PC and you like tactical war games. This isn't strategic. This isn't, like Hearts of Iron or something. It's not a real, not a first person shooter. This is a tactical game with its DNA is pure tabletop hex encountered with some miniature thrown on top of it. It's just really, really well done. So kudos to Joe Bader and the MicroProse for putting this game out. This is an excellent game. So for now, that's it. I'm signing off. My name's Joe. This has been Hexed Encountered, and as always, happy gaming.